My mountain cabin booking was already reserved. By me, the booking system shows the room was reserved by myself. Days before I made the reservation. I want to say up front that I've gone back and checked the confirmation emails. The payment records. The timestamps. Everything. More than once, because the right double out is the version I'd prefer to believe. I can't make it fit the evidence. Oh, here's what actually happened in order, as close to exactly as I can manage. I booked a cabin 2 hours up the mountain for a solo trip, the kind I take every year around this time. No cell service, a wood stove, a guestbook by the door that previous render sign, the whole rustic getaway pack. I found the listing on a small independent site, not one of the big platforms, run directly by the property's caretaker, a man named Warren, who answers his own emails and still uses a landline for the actual booking confirmation call. I paid the deposit on a Thursday morning at work, on my lunch break, time-stamped 12:14 p.m. An email confirmation arriving 1 minute later. I remember this specifically because I was annoyed at how fast it came through. I hadn't finished my sandwich. The trip was set for weeks out. I didn't think about the cabin again until the week before, when I got a second confirmation email. A standard reminder, dates and directions. Except this one included a line. Except your early E14th has been noted. Warren will leave the key under the mat, as usual. I hadn't discussed an early arrival. I hadn't discussed anything with Warren beyond the original booking. I called the number on the email, and Warren picked up, sounding faintly confused himself. He said the note had come from a phone call he'd logged 4 days earlier, from my number in which I had asked to move up my arrival, and had mentioned off, and that I'd been up that way before, years back, which was also not true. I've never been to that mountain in my life. He was polite about it. People sometimes get their trip details mixed up, he said. He offered to correct the note. I let him, and told myself the same thing I'd tell myself several more times before this was over. Some explainable mistake, a crossed wire, a mix-up with another guest. And I drove up on the actual date, no early arrival. Key, exactly where it should have been. The cabin was small and plain in the way I'd wanted. 1 room, wood stove. A guest book on the side table by the door, its cover worn soft from years of hands. I made tea, unpacked, and did what I always do on the first night of a trip like this. I sat down and read through the guest book. The way you'd read a hotel's old comment cards, half out of boredom and half ace before me. Most of the entries were what you'd expect. Thank yous, complaints about the Wi-Fi that doesn't exist, a running joke about a raccoon that lives near the woodpile. I was maybe 2/3 through the book when I found an entry, undated in the way a few of the earlier pages were. That stopped me. It was signed with my name. Full name. The way I actually signed things. Not a common variant. Not a coincidence of a common name. My exact name, in handwriting close enough to my own that I had to hold my own signature up beside it. Wasn't. The entry described a solo trip, a first-night dinner of canned soup, because I hadn't planned well. A bad dream about the wood stove going out. Small, specific, mundane details. Not the kind of thing you'd fake if you were trying to impress or frighten anyone. Which somehow made it worse. I hadn't written it. I checked the date range on the Guestbook's other entries around it. The ones before and after were both from 2 years earlier. I had never been to this cabin 2 years earlier. I have receipts, calendar entries, photo. Somewhere else entirely. I called Warren again that night. Cell reception thin, but enough for a call. I asked if he remembered a guest with my name from around that time. He went quiet for a second. The specific quiet of someone deciding how much to say, and told me that yes, actually, he did remember, because it had been an odd stay. The guest had checked in normally, stayed the full week, checked out on schedule. No incidents. He only remembered it at all because of one detail. On the last night, he corrected himself. You'd asked him, unprompted, whether anyone had ever booked the cabin twice at once. Once for a real stay, and once for some. He said he hadn't understood the question at the time, and still didn't. I asked him for one thing after that, and I regret asking it, because I don't think the answer helped me. Whether the Guestbook entry from 2 years ago had said anything about what I'd be doing on this exact trip, this specific date. He said he didn't know. He'd have to check his own copy of an older photo he'd taken of the pages for his records, in case guests ever disputed damages. He said he'd look and call me back. He never called back. I don't know if that means he found nothing, or found something, and decided not to tell me. Alone. And told. I want to be honest about the state I was in by the second night, because it matters for what I did next. I was telling myself out loud in the empty cabin that this was an elaborate mix-up, possibly a prank by someone who knew me, possibly a stray. A coincidence of names and handwriting. That meant nothing. I was aware, even as I said these things, that I didn't believe them, and that saying them out loud was more for the sound of my own voice in a room that otherwise had none than for the content of what I was saying. I read further into the guestbook that second night, past the entry with my name, looking for anything else that matched. 3 pages later, dated the same 2 years earlier week, there was a second entry. Same handwriting. Shorter. Woke up at 2 a.m. Emin Pettis thought I heard someone reading out loud downstairs. Went to check. No one there. Fell back asleep. Around 3, I checked the clock. It was 1:52. I didn't go downstairs. I was already downstairs, the guest book on my lap by the wood stove, so there was nowhere further down to go. I did at 2 a.m. Exactly, by the clock on my phone. Here's something. Not reading, not a voice at all. Really, more like the specific papery sound of a page being turned. Close, near enough that I looked instinctively at the guest book in my own hands to check if I'd moved, if I'd been the one turning pages without not. Icing. I hadn't. The book in my lap was still open to the same page it had been open to for the last 10 minutes. No. I called a friend the next morning, the first person outside Warren I'd told any of this to. Mostly because I needed to hear it out loud to someone who hadn't been inside the cabin, to see if it still sounded real when I said it into daylight. Reception instead of firelight and silence. She listened and asked a reasonable question I hadn't thought to ask myself. Had I checked whether the entry 2 years ago described anything that hadn't happened to me yet on this trip? Something I could watch for. Something that would either happen or wouldn't. Proving or disproving whatever this was. I went back to the guest book that night and read the rest of the old entry properly. Slower this time. And found the line I had apparently skimmed past the first time in my hurry to get through it. On the last night, I finally wrote down what I should have written the first time. And after that, it stopped following me home. I sat with that a long time. I want to be precise about what it implied, because I've turned it over enough times to be fairly sure of the shape of it, even if I don't understand the mechanism. The entry wasn't describing a stay that had already happened to a different version. Me. It was describing my stay. This one, the one I was currently in the middle of, written down in advance, 2 years before I arrived, by whatever it is that seems to know, ahead of time, exactly how these trips of mine tend to go. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat by the wood stove with the guest book, the actual current, blank final page in front of me, and understood that the old entry had left me a kind of instruction, buried inside what looked like an ordinary complaint. Write something down before you leave, or it doesn't stop following you. I wrote in the guestbook on my last morning. I won't say exactly what. I've decided that whatever function it served, saying it out loud now, to anyone reading this, I signed it with my real name and the real date, closed the book, and left it on the side table the way I'd found it. Pee back under the mat, drive home uneventful. I called Warren once more, a week later, mostly to see if he'd ever found the older photographs of the guestbook pages he'd mentioned. He said he had actually, and that they matched what I'd described, word for word, entry for entry. Except for one difference he found strange enough to mention unprompted. In his photographed copy, taken well before my meaning of my old entry was different. It didn't say, it said something closer to it. I'll stop following the next one, once she knows to write it down too. I asked him to check the current physical book, my current entry, the one I'd written on my last morning, against what he remembered. He went quiet again, that same specific quiet, and said he'd rather not go back up there to check right now, if that was all right with me. He hasn't been back up since. He stopped confirming new bookings for that cabin by phone, and started doing it entirely by email instead, and I don't think that's a coincidence, though he's never said so directly. I looked the listing up again a few months ago, but it's still active.